of the owners of Global Communications Network and the operators of this radio station.
Today can be the turning point in your life by making a simple decision.
Fundamental questions of navigation. Where am I? Where am I going? And how do I get there from here?
I invite the leaders of our planet to ask themselves these three questions before they make any crucial decisions.
But if you don't make decisions, you're going to stay right where you are.
We are all map makers.
We are in a time of transition.
If we're going to change, we have to change the direction that we're going.
Our planet needs leaders who know where they want to go.
When we change the direction we're going, then we want to make sure we're going in the right direction.
Leaders who can see the big picture.
Because if we're not, we're going to either go backwards or we're going to stay where we are.
Recognizing the psychological and the spiritual shifts and changes that need to be made, often from the inside to the outside.
To be able to shape your future, you have to be willing and able to change your paradigm.
Complex journeys require navigation. The path to the truth is one such journey. This is your GPS. Hairstyling services provided by J.D. Edwards Salon and Spa, Palmdale Shopping Plaza, Madera Street. Accessories provided by Chevette Williamson Jewelry. Standout jewelry for standout women.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to GPS Global Paradigm Shift on Global 99.5 FM. I am your host, Michelle Malcolm, and it's always a pleasure to be in your company. Thank you so much for tuning in today. So last week, we did a show on gender-based violence. My headphones are freaking out. Let's see if I can get this to turn on. And the panel was mostly women, all women. And obviously, some men thought that it would only be fair, and I agree, that we bring some men into this conversation to get a male perspective on gender-based violence. Because as we would have said during that show last week, you cannot have a conversation about gender-based violence and not consider the factor of the male perspective in this whole conversation. And so that is what we're going to be talking about today. And I thought it was very important to get two men on the show who aren't just going to be talking from, a barbershop type of talk where, we get in and we shoot the breeze or whatever, but men who could bring a professional perspective to the conversation. That's it. That's what that is what I am hoping to achieve during the show today. And so we're going to be hearing from these men in a short moment about all of the dynamics as it relates to the male psyche and what needs to happen to bring about an end to gender-based violence. One of the things that was mentioned during the show last week, and we sort of only touched on it, and I want us to go a little further during this show today, is the fact that gender-based violence is sometimes perpetrated against men as well. It's not just a matter of women who are victims of gender-based violence. And so on the show today, we're going to be talking about all aspects of this problem. The fact that men are sometimes victims, and why society needs to pay a close attention to that. The fact that men are more often the perpetrators, and what is happening as it relates to the male psyche that leads to this behavior. So I'm going to have my producer bring in our guests right now. And gentlemen, I'm having some issues with my laptop this morning. It's just taking its own sweet slow time to boot up. So
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 I'm
I'm
going
going
to,
to,
I don't
I
know why
don't
it's doing
know
that
why
because
it's doing
somebody
that because
went on my
somebody,
end. So I'm going to
I'm going
ask
to
you
ask you
gentlemen to
gentlemen
introduce
to,
yourselves
um,
while I
while I
wait for
wait for my,
my laptop to come
to
on.
come
So
on.
we're
So
going
we're
to
going to
begin
begin
with
with
Kevin.
I,
With
with
Kevin
Kevin
McNeil.
McNeil.
Kevin, could you
Kevin,
go ahead and
go ahead
introduce
and
yourself, please? Did he
did
hear
he hear
me?
me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can
I
hear
can
you,
hear you.
yes.
Okay, I was just getting a lot of feedback. That's all. How you doing today?
I'm
I'm
good. I'd
good.
be
I'd
doing
be
a
doing
lot
a
better
lot
if my
better if my
laptop would
laptop would
cooperate.
cooperate.
Okay, that's
So
awesome.
go
That's
ahead
Go
and
ahead and
introduce
introduce
yourself,
yourself,
please.
please.
Yeah, my name is Kevin McNeil. I am a retired detective, special victims detective, out of Atlanta, Georgia. I am the CEO and owner of the 12 Project, an organization that I created to educate the world on the effects of trauma and abuse.
All right.
All
Thank you
right.
so
Thank
much
you
and
so much and
welcome to the
welcome to
show.
the show.
Now, that
Now, that
feedback isn't
feedback
coming
isn't
from
coming from
me,
me,
Jason,
Jason,
because
because
my mic
my
is
mic is
muted.
muted.
So I don't know
So
where
I
it's
don't know where
coming
it's
from.
coming from.
Maybe
Maybe
David.
David.
Elder David,
Elder
can you
David,
go
can you
ahead and
go ahead and
introduce
introduce
yourself,
yourself,
please?
please?
Just want to say a pleasant good afternoon to those of you listening in. I'm Dave Williams. You know me from Prison Fellowship Bahamas, the International Men's Day Bahamas Committee, and even more so from the Uplifting Men's Ministry, one who has well trained, I call it, in gender-based and sexual violence prevention.
All right, gentlemen, welcome to you both. And finally, my laptop has decided to behave itself. And so we good to go. All right. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation to you both. Now, you know, last week we did this show on gender-based violence, and it's a very touchy subject because immediately after the show ended, the phone rang, and one of my listeners wanted to have a one-on-one with me as to all of the negative influences that women have in men's lives, and he thought that show was not fair to men. And so I promised him that I would do a part in this whole question of gender-based violence, and we would talk about what leads to this problem, because it's obviously a multi-layered issue. It's not something that we can just, it's not something that happens in a vacuum. In other words, there are many layers to this, and in the work that you do, Mr. McNeil, I am sure that you are experiencing all levels of what leads to this. What, in your view, are some of the underlying factors that are not receiving sufficient attention from a male perspective when it comes to gender-based violence?
Well, I think a lot of it is, again, thank you for having me on the show. Thank you to your viewers for listening in. One of the things is that most people don't understand that violence really is a result of unresolved trauma. And we live in a culture that's not very victim friendly. We live in a culture that's very not only pervasive when it comes to talking about abusive items or trauma or past trauma, particularly when it comes to the male gender, because we are taught that men are not supposed to cry. We're not to express any type of emotion other than anger or excitement. And what happens with that is that when boys come up and they come up with all this pain and trauma from their childhood, that energy has to go somewhere. What we do not transmit, we transmute. So when you cannot transmit your problems and your trauma, you end up transmuting it or converting it to any type of other energy, whether that be sexual energy, whether that be addictive energy, or whether that be violent, destructive energy. Energy cannot be destroyed. It has to be converted. So what we're looking at is that because we haven't talked about these things, of not giving men the space to be vulnerable, to talk about what ails them, it comes out in different forms and different shapes. And oftentimes it's in destructive ways rather than constructive ways. So that's what we're seeing when we start talking about violence. It's the symptom of something and not the something itself.
Agreed. Elder David, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, sorry. Give me a question, please.
Oh, we were talking about the multi-layers that are a part of this whole phenomenon of gender-based violence. It's not just something that happens in a vacuum, but there are many facets to this. And one of the things that Mr. McNeil was saying is that persons who are often the perpetrators of this violence have experienced some kind of trauma themselves, which has led to where we are at today. I like the way Dr. David Allen puts it. He says we shouldn't ask what is wrong with you, but what happened to you. So what are your thoughts on that as to all of the facets that are involved in gender-based violence from a male perspective?
That actually is my first point that I wrote down. The fact that men who themselves have been abused physically, emotionally, mentally, are also individuals who happen to participate or be perpetrators of what we call the word gender-based violence. And so my experience has been, and you may hear me talk a lot from the prison perspective because I've spent many years involved in prison ministries. And right. And so one of the things I've discovered over the years, and I wish I had some statistics that I could have brought here today, but one of the things I've discovered is that quite a number of those men who are actually, and I'm speaking about the Bahamas Department of Corrections, incarcerated for gender-based violence, they themselves have experienced violence at some form or the other, and from early childhood, even, and I know this could become a bit controversial, even to the extent of beatings, right? To the extent of saying mommy and daddy, in the case of saying mommy beat, daddy beat mommy, and so out of that, the thing that they have learned is violence, meet violence with violence. And so I believe, and as we will talk more about it, so I believe based on their early childhood experience, they themselves have now conformed. That's all that they know. That's the environment that they grew up. And so most people respond based on the environment that they grew up, what they were taught. Mm-hmm. And as a result of it, we have to change the mindset. Even for me, even the conversations. Many, many years ago, Michelle, I was not involved in anything with gender-based violence, mm-hmm. sexual violence prevention, any of this. And I too, as a male, had this attitude that, I would beat her down, and it wasn't until I was invited in a particular space and I was educated, then I began to see it in a different light. And this is what I teach my son. And we ought to teach men, because when we gather around the basketball court and we talk and we share, and so we'd say, oh, yeah, boy, I would bust up and I would do this. And I, as another male, would join in the conversation. Mm-hmm. Whereas 10, 15 years later, I would be one to say, hey, no, I can't agree with this. I don't support this. And I'll stand up, even though it means being different, being called a punk, a sissy, or whatever word we use. And so I think to begin the process, we need more men like that who's prepared to stand up and say, hey, I don't support this.
Mm-hmm. I want to read a comment from one of my Facebook viewers. And Catherine says in this comment, the entire conversation around gender-based violence is dishonest. Violence is violence.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that? Because I agree that violence is violence, but I don't know that it is a good thing to just put everything under one umbrella when it comes to trying to figure out how to end it. What are your thoughts on that, gentlemen?
Kevin, let me go first. And it's good to see you, Kevin. We haven't talked since you were on the show last. So
yes, sir.
Yes, it's good. This person brought up a good conversation. Last year I was at a Zonta event where the Zonta sponsored it, and we call it our first lady, Mistress Ann Davis, mm-hmm. Office of the Spouse, mm-hmm. and she spoke. And I said, when I was given an opportunity, and if you'd notice, and I'll come out a lot, my nonprofit is uplifting men's ministry, and that's what I really do. Mm-hmm. That's how I got involved in prison. But I say that to answer your question. I posted on Facebook a few weeks ago, and I did a show on it right here, when they were talking about a domestic situation that went down where somebody I think was killed, and I said, while we support, and I support the prevention of gender-based violence against our women and girls, but I said, what about the men? And this is why when I said to you earlier, Michelle, I'm going to speak from the prison perspective, because I've been 20 years volunteer. Men are dying every day. And I said this at the Zonta Club last year. We're losing our brothers, husbands, uncles, I mean, you name it. And there's not been an outcry as such with the violence against the women and girls. And so when you look at it in the perspective, I call it eternally, lives are being lost every day. And whether it's a woman, it's a girl, a boy, or a man, we have to do what it takes to stop the violence. I'm a part of Dr. Carlos Reed. We call it the Brotherhood. I'm with Keith Cox, International Men's Day. I'm with Prison Fellowship Bahamas. Because why? We do a lot of work and outreach in the communities. We're seeking to reach our young men. I don't just want to participate in the gender-based violence against the women and girls and watch our young men slaughter each other in the streets. And I could lift up my head and feel satisfied. I was at a GPS summit again this morning with my partner, Kendra Bow. Mrs. Ann Davis was our guest speaker. And she talked about the gender-based violence. And again, it started something in me again that we need to reach out to our young men. So I agree with them. Violence is violence, because when we lose someone to violence, there's a mother who feel that pain of that young man.
No doubt, right? But I want to say this. I want to stick up in that right there and add this to that. Because I heard the same argument. I can't remember if I was on YouTube or somewhere else, where this whole idea of violence against women, and somebody raised the point. I don't hear anybody talking about violence against men. And the response was this: every time there's a murder involving one male killing another male or whatever, that's headline news.
Mm-hmm.
However, there are countless women and children who are being abused every single day, or very frequently, that never goes reported. So I completely agree with you that attention needs to be paid to the male, because in my estimation, the male is at the center of this whole question, or this problem. You cannot fix it without addressing the male.
Right.
But to say that nobody's paying attention to the male in terms of, violence against men, that's making headlines every day. But how many women and children are going silently being abused? Whenever it does come to the light, whenever we do have a situation like a Clarissa Culmer or something else that comes to light, then everybody's all in an uproar. But that is just a fiction of what is actually taking place out there. So I want us to be very careful. And I totally agree with you that the male has to be a very important part of this conversation. Let's get you in on this, Mr. McNeil. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we have to keep the conversation going by talking about the power dynamics when you start talking about gender-based, because oftentimes it is the male perpetrating violence against the lesser vessel. When I say lesser vessel, I don't mean in value. I mean the person who's probably doesn't have as much strength to defend themselves, or has a loud voice as the male does, as a platform to express themselves. Because oftentimes many of us were taught as young boys and young girls that what happens in the house stays in the house. And so we've been taught to keep silent, in particular females who come forward. Contrary to males who try to stand up for themselves, females are often killed, murdered, maimed, and all these other things once they do decide to stand up for themselves, or they're told to go back and be a wife, or go back and be a good mate to the man that's doing the things to them. And so if you want to talk about not generalizing the violence, you got to talk about violence. Then it's not just through force, because that's what the word means, force. If we're going to talk about the misappropriation of power, we have to talk about abuse, because we live in an abusive society and world, if we're going to be honest, that uses the female gender, the female body, to market to men, to tell men that unless they're able to control and rule women, they're not a man. And so it's this poison, toxic masculinity that's pouring into this idea of men trying to control females, whether it be in unequal pay, whatever it is. We live in a society that abuse is rampant, and we only talk about violence when it gets to the extreme. And when it deals with the male gender not being addressed in a way that we talk about, why are there more males in prison than there are women? There's a reason for that, right? So I don't think it's a subject matter of men not being included as much as it is, what are we talking about when we include men in this conversation about violence? Are we just tolerating or saying it's just normal for men to commit violence? Or are we saying that this violence stems from somewhere else deeper than what we're talking about?
Very, very important point. I want to read another comment. This one is from Siobhan Hollis. Hi, Siobhan. Siobhan says, what we are missing in our country are men who are like Kevin and Dave, who are unafraid of calling our violence and have used their experience to enact changes and be the voice for those men who are afraid to speak and who themselves are victims. She continues, too many times we have men who attack the women movement, yet when called upon to voice their opinion or take a stand, they hide. It's too much lip service and not enough men willing to walk with women and unify to combat gender-based violence. It takes an intervention to speak up. Finally, she says, we need intervention and prevention programs. Too many times we put bandage on bullet wounds in this country. Yes, there are both sexes abuse. However, statistics show females are at a much higher rate. All right. Thank you so much, Siobhan, for those comments. So here's the thing. As the president of the Miss Bahamas organization, we put a lot of heavy emphasis on developing young women. And I'm often asked, well, what about the men? Well, what about the men? What are you doing for the men? And my response is, a part of the problem that we have is that men feel like women are always telling them what to do. That's a part of the problem. Where are the men who can address the problems with the men? I am doing my part to help to uplift young women and help them to understand their value and their worth and their purpose and their calling. Who is doing the exact thing for the men? It can't be where we are being asked as women, well, what, why are you only focusing on women? What are the men doing?
If I can answer that, or at least help answer that for you. Now, here's the reverse psychology, what you just shared with me earlier. There are many men organizations, which of course I know about, but the point is you don't have them featured and focused on the newspapers as much as, not that you want to compete with the women. I think more focus could be on men's organization and positive things men are doing. I give you a classic example. November 19th was International Men's Day. Once again, the Office of the Spouse was there. There was Mr. Alfred Sayers spoke in the absence of the Prime Minister. Mr. Obi Whitcomb also was supposed to be there. Ms. Lisa Raming was in, a number of others. And to my astonishment, there was no media there. Absolutely none, except Bahamas Information Services.
Who was responsible for your PR?
I don't know where to throw the blame, if there's someone to throw the blame, but my point is that the media should have been, this was November 19th, covering International Men's Day with the focus. Let's reverse the role with some event that the females are having. That's all over the papers. And I would think, and I thank Mr. Dwight Strawn from Guardian Radio, he gave us a week on the shows to promote and to share. So I'm just saying, I think now the men's organization are not being highlighted. There are many men organizations out there, but they does not, even today, like once again, we're not competing, right?
Right.
But even today, when I look at the papers, and I always look at this, there are so many the entire section on to the women's this and various articles. Why? And my point is, if the problem is the men, which we all agree, none of us can run from it. So why can't we highlight, feature, focus more men organization? That would also spur and encourage more men organization to become a part of what is happening. But that is in the back burner. That is not in the forefront like the female organizations. And this is why you don't hear about a lot of positive things that men are.
Point well taken. Perhaps you should hire a female to do your PR.
Okay, maybe so then.
And the other side of that is, to be honest and truthful, that men helping men don't make money, right? It's not a marketing thing that appeals to the greater masses. Because when you look at all the motivational speakers, the great ones and the big ones, they started their careers off by catering to women, by telling women how to live, by telling women how to better their lives, by telling women how to date, by telling women how to dress. So there's always been money in men and pouring into and trying to control the female rather than trying to heal the male. And so there's no money or marketing in that. So when you start to talk about healing men, the cameras are not going to show up. There's not going to be much interest and much pull, because that's what I do for a living, is help abused men come out of their trauma and live their lives. And for your listeners and those who don't know about me, at the age of 12, I was kidnapped and raped by a male. and nearly murdered and
Wow.
killed and held hostage and had to fight my way out of that situation. And never once did I tell anything about what happened to me. And so oftentimes people don't know that. And then they ask, well, why you're so passionate about what you do? It's because I know what it's like to be told that my masculinity was tied up in my sexual organ and my power structure. And so I was too ashamed to say that I was overpowered, even at the age of 12, by a grown adult male who took my virginity.
Oh my God.
Took,
And I
took
can
my
imagine
masculinity.
carrying that burden.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's powerful. I just want to say for the record that we have been in much part of this conversation thus far. I know that David has talked about the prison ministry, and I just want to make it very clear that it's not only the gentleman, the young boy who ends up in prison that is perpetrating violence against women and children. You have professionals, you have doctors, you have lawyers, you have business owners, you have clergymen who are abusing women and children. Let's not forget that. So clearly this is a problem that goes beyond just urban communities, but this is a widespread problem that goes, the tentacles reach much further than that. And this is why I think it's so important for us to have this conversation, because there are many women who are suffering in silence at the hands of men who people would be shocked to find out at the end of the day that this is actually going on in their homes. I've heard stories. And so we have to make it very clear that while this is a problem for some in urban communities, that it doesn't stop there. This is a wider problem. And on the other side of the break, I'm going to play a clip from an actor, a South African actor. Now, we know that South Africa is one of the, I think was voted one of the most dangerous places in the world for women to live, in South Africa, because of the high degree of violence against women there. We're going to hear from an actor on the other side of the break who was himself an abuser, who had a change of heart, and he brings some really interesting perspective to this conversation. So stay with us. That is on the other side of the break. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. You are watching GPS, Global Paradigm Shift, or listening to on radio on Global 99.5 FM.
Understanding your microbiome, also known as your gut ecosystem, can change everything you thought you knew about nutrition, digestion, immunity, and metabolism. Keeping your gut ecosystem healthy and balanced is essential. Ultimate Microbiome by Longevity was specifically formulated to optimize this ecosystem. It provides the advanced support your gut needs through prebiotic, probiotic, and postbiotic supplementation. Our unique blend of probiotics includes Lactobacillus and Plantarum, healthy bacteria that can help prevent harmful bacteria from taking over your gut. Increasing your gut's population of beneficial bacteria creates a more balanced gut microbiome, which has been shown to aid in weight loss, skin health, sleep, mood, and may even help with seasonal allergies. Ultimate Microbiome also promotes the production of postbiotics. Postbiotics are key to help regulate your gastrointestinal health. To enhance digestion, Digizyme Multi-Enzyme Complex, a blend of 5 specific enzymes, has been added to Ultimate Microbiome. It can help break down food so your body can better absorb nutrients. Plus, we've added our proprietary I-26 Hyperimmune Egg Powder to aid in the elimination of disease-causing gut bacteria and help your body balance its immune response. Ultimate Microbiome, the scientific, proprietary, and holistic approach to gut health that helps optimize your body's entire gut ecosystem. To learn more, contact your Longevity associate.
Welcome to Sunshine Auto, the hardest place on the planet for a rim, paint, and tires.
We are your auto superstore for rims, Lexani, Azaras, Trueform, Western, Lux, Fuel, Tracklight, Tough, Rough Racing, Velocity, mud, all-terrain, and low-profile tires, cars, homes, and commercial window tinting. At Sunshine Auto, we put God first and customer is king.
Blessed love.
To stay healthy, it's crucial to make sure you get the nutrition you need every day. But it's difficult to get all your recommended vitamins and minerals from food alone. Even in the United States, 94% of people are deficient in at least one nutrient. Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 by Youngevity is a simple, convenient, and affordable way to help your body get the essential nutrients it needs. It's an advanced plant-driven multivitamin mineral complex that contains certified organic whole foods, trace minerals, and antioxidants. BTT 2.0 supports your body's natural defense system with a proprietary blend of energy-boosting and body-loving nutrients, plus prebiotics, probiotics, amino acids, and enzymes that support digestion. With an unusually high ORAC score of 8,000, you get even more antioxidants to help combat free radicals that can cause damage to your cells. But to get the most benefit and value from any multivitamin, your body must be able to break down the nutrients so you can fully absorb them. Otherwise, they'll just pass through your system without doing any good. Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 was specially formulated with synergizing cofactors to ensure you get maximum nutrient absorption. Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 is the easiest way to give your body the balance and complete daily vitamin mineral supplement it needs for optimal support of your overall health. To learn more, contact your Youngevity associate.
This portion of GPS is brought to you by Tiki Bikini Hut at Junkanoo Beach. Great food, cool tropical drinks, and family fun in the sun.
Welcome back to GPS Global Paradigm Shift on Global 99.5 FM. Michelle Malcolm in your company. Today we are talking about part 2 of our discussion on gender-based violence, but this time from a male perspective. And I want to bring in my guests who are here today. And my guests are Mr. Kevin McNeil and Elder David Williams. And so if you want to jump in on this conversation, the telephone numbers to call are 326-0271, 326-0271, 326-0271, or 326-0272, 326-0272. And the WhatsApp line is 824-9952, 824-9952. Now, prior to the break, I promised you that we would play a clip from an actor, a South African actor, who talks about his journey as it relates to gender-based violence, having been a former perpetrator who is now turned advocate to help men realize that they don't have to be the toxic end of this discussion, but can actually be a part of the solution. Let's go to clip number.
It basically started in 1984 when it was evident that I had a propensity for being violent, but fortunately, from that time on, I think from 84 on up until, I had a conscience that spoke to me. And it was only until 1998 when I had an opportunity of doing a play called Koming with 4 young men from Alexander who were part of the men's sector, men's sector of an organization called ADAPT. And ADAPT, if anything, they were pioneers in having men as partners in fighting, in their fight against domestic violence. And I worked with these boys and we came up with this play called Koming, which Koming is a sort of word for going to the mountain, for the rite of passage. And if you remember very well, Koming, when you went to go to the mountains, it's all about enduring physical violence and coming, at the end, on the other side of it. And with Koming, basically, it was more, we used that as a metaphor for a psychological, psychological initiation.
Let's talk about the psychology then. What was it in your case that made you so violent with women?
Look, the thing is, we kind of grow up in an environment that is violent. And I grew up, and my youthful days were during the height of apartheid. And you grow up in an environment that, that is violent, and you see it happening around you, and you think it's a way of life, and that's basically has to do with social conditioning. But I think in dealing with that, I want to share this quote by M.S. Azar. You know, and Amos there says, beware my body and soul. Beware above all of crossing your arms and assuming the sterile attitude of a spectator. For life is not a spectacle, and a sea of griefs is not a proscenium, and a man who wails is not a dancing bear. And I think for me, you know, men out there are crying, you know, and it's basically their pain that they you know, that they're going through personally. You know, they say hurt people, you know, and I think it was James Baldwin, and he's quoted as saying, you have to be in pain to cause pain, you know.
What is your response then to people who say in these conversations about the role of men in reducing the scourge of gender-based violence, often we humanize the abuser at the expense of those who are abused? Some even go as far as saying we make excuses for abuse of men.
We're not making an excuse. I don't think we're doing that, you know. I don't think we're doing that. But I think, you know, we have to discuss the problem holistically, you know, and hence I'm saying, and the thing is, and, you know, sometimes when we say we talked about gender-based violence, we tend to just, you know, throw a blanket over it. But there is domestic violence where there's what you call it, intimate partner violence. And there's a very, you know, there's certain circumstances that actually lead to that, you know, the things that happen in that space. And for me, you know, for me is that somehow men, we've got to come to a space where I think we've got to, let me put it this way, we have to open up the cupboards and let the skeletons tumble out.
But to do that, we need to then take on the violence that comes with masculinity.
Exactly. And one, I cannot, you know, deny the fact that our masculinity is very, very toxic, and it goes and it comes. I mean, it goes back a long way. I want to share a little poem by Mongani Wallis wrote, and this poem, I mean, was in a collection of my poems of his poems that I bought, I think, in the 70s. And the poem goes like this: my brothers in the streets. Oh, you black boys, you thin shadows who emerge like a chill in the night. You whose heart-tearing footsteps sound in the night. My brothers in the street, who holiday in jails, who rest in hospitals, who smile at insults, who fear the wise. Oh, you black boys, you hoard waters that sweep over black pastures. My brothers in the street, who booze and listen to jazz, who have tasted the rape of mothers, grandmothers, sisters, baby girls and boys, who take arms from white hands, who grab bread from black mouths. Oh, you black boys, who spill blood as easy as saying footsake. Listen, come my black brothers in the streets, listen, it's black women who are crying.
I thought that was so powerful. There's so many nuggets that we can take from that. The toxic masculinity, the fact that this behavior is socialized, because as I've often said in these shows, nobody's born with this behavior. This is a learned behavior. So understanding that, how do we unsocialize? How do we turn the table in this conversation to deal with the hurting men who are really crying out? And I know that as a society, it's easy for us to say, oh, they're not crying. They're making people cry. They're hurting people. But hurting people hurt people. This is really, in many instances, a cry for help. So what do we do? How do we unsocialize the person who has gone through that trauma, who is now just lashing out and really, in an essence, crying for help?
You know, I would say, and once again, you would hear me referring to prison. My partner and I, Kendra Bo from Rite of Passage, we did a program in 2020, and it was the first time it was held in the Bahamas at BDOCS, that's the Bahamas Department of Corrections, where we had a space of 25 sex offenders. A program called ECT. We engage, we communicate, and we transform, where we talked about the myths of rape, what is a rapist, 3 types of rape, risk factors and all of that, right? And the program, actually, we had pre-tests and we were supposed to have some post-tests, but COVID came in about March of 2020. So to answer your question, and that was a part of the process, one of the things we have to do, and like I said to you, uplift men. Because we're now talking about the solution. We need to uplift men. We can't go in the prison, for example. As a part of this program, there was something that talked about, and I wrote it down. It said, if you take care of your children, you are a man. But if you don't take care of them, you are a boy. What is that saying to me as a male? I know I'm wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we use this word, but emasculate men, pulling them down. I know I'm wrong. So now you're telling me, because for whatever reason I've not taken care of my children, which I ought to. I am a boy. That is not the way to start. So what do? We need to meet people. I go back to Christ, who is in charge of my life. We ought to meet people where they are, right? And uplift persons. This is why I love prison ministries, because you meet persons who are the lowest. And so one may say, well, Dave, how do you do it? I'm saying to you, for us, Kendra and I, my partner, we share from the spiritual perspective. We share from the educational perspective. We talked about even the physical perspective. How? We recognize that these persons have been hurt. We sit down, we engage, we communicate, we have a conversation, helping to understand why I did what I did. Restorative justice talks about acknowledging my wrong and how do I restore. It is information like this, programs like this, which help in turning around men in the situation. We talked about some of the conflicts for some of the techniques for the conflict resolution, the anger management. So as opposed to take the key, lock them up and throw them away, we sat there and we engaged with them, we communicated with them, and we transformed them with the belief that these individuals will return to society. And when they return back to society, the information that is shared would be useful. I just want to share this with you. Just last week, I was at the Department of Corrections, and there are under 200 sex offenders right now, right? The numbers exact was about, I think, 170 something, I believe, right? Persons. Do we just as society now say, okay, hey, he or she then did this, he or she then did? No, we now need to help to transform and engage this conversation so that when the under 200 sex offenders return back into society, they will return back in with a new mindset. I just want to stop there.
McNeil?
Yes, I agree. And I think that's that old saying that you should know the truth and the truth will set you free. And I think that's the beginning of it, is to be honest and truthful with ourselves. I think we're honest about it. If we were honest, we really want to be honest that violence sells. It's marketed to us. You look at our movies, you listen to music. I mean, we treat women as the lesser being in a lot of our things in our culture and society. And it makes money. You know, we use women to sell cars. We use women for marketing. You hear the rap songs and some of the other songs and music that talk about having sex with women and what makes a guy a guy. And I think if we're really going to really deal with this issue, we have to be truthful in the fact that we're trying to fight something that at the same time we're celebrating and benefiting from. So sickness is a business. And so if we really want to heal, we have to confront the institutions and the cultural acceptance that we have been allowing ourselves and our children to listen, to play violent video games and the sort. And so we have to be very honest if we're going to have this conversation. We can't just deal with the symptoms and not the problem. And so I always tell people, you know, the eyes are great judges, but they're horrible listeners. If you're trying to listen with your eyes, and justice comes by hearing. In fact, the root word for heart is hear, and the root word for hear is ear. So whoever has an ear, let them hear the pain that's coming into our culture, that the gunshots coming at the end of barrels. It's not that violence is caused by the gun. It's caused by the trigger that's pulling the gun. And that is what you need to listen to. What is the spirit behind the action that's causing the violence in our culture and our society?
Is that a caller for the show? We have a caller on the line. Caller, welcome to GPS.
Yes, I'm not hearing you good. Could they turn you up, please? This is Berenice Johnson, the original. Good afternoon to you, Miss Michelle Malcolm, to Mr. Davis Williams, and Mr. Kevin McNeil from Atlanta, Georgia.
Good afternoon.
How you doing?
Let me give thanks to the Almighty God through Jesus Christ of Nazareth, enveloping us in the Holy Spirit. And of course, good afternoon to my mortal boss, former Prime Minister Hubert Alexander Ingram, God's leader's leader. And also, good afternoon to God's ushered in administration and the 7 women, I must place emphasis on them, led by the Honorable Prime Minister Philip Edward Brave Davis. This, what we are experiencing, is not about politics, and I'm glad that everybody is on the right page. What we are experiencing now is the ushering in of the biblical established new knowledge, and what we now are understanding from what the physical aspect of war. The acronym of war is Woman Against Righteousness. Now, from time immemorial, I don't know, Ms. Michelle Malcolm, if you heard about the program, I tried to reach Dr. Colin Archer, Investing in Being Human. And this is the main thing that has to be addressed, because we have individuals in human form, but they are not actually divinely created human beings. And this is the property. I was given permission to speak about it from the United States of America federal government correspondent. And what we are experiencing now is a part of some of the eugenic experimentations that went on, especially here in the Bahamas during the 80s. And what we have to address, and this is why I said that we must have an open forum at the Paul Farquharson headquarters where individuals will call in, because what we must deal with now is divine truth that shall ignite love. Love applies justice. Justice equals to peace. And peace will never happen without understood forgiveness. Forgiveness is now what is necessary. Okay. And reference to Mr. Kevin, what is it, McNeil? See, we have international links of financial crimes out of Georgia. And this is one of the reasons why most all of our prime ministers were under attack, because from 1992 until 2020 election.
Bring it home, please. Bring it home, please.
I'm bringing it home, Miss Michelle Malcolm. This is universal. This is a universal shift, and it's because of the investigations with the finest law enforcement agency, the Royal Bahamas Police Force. Mm-hmm. Okay? And that is why I know that Mr. Brave Davis, in his wisdom, and also Miss Anne, Lady Anne, the First Lady, Anne Marie Davis, shall see to it that it is dealt with at the Paul Farquharson headquarters, because they will not overthrow Mr. Davis.
All right.
Okay?
Thank you.
That is the main thing that is happening now.
Thank you, Bernice. Thank you, Bernice. Thank you, Bernice. Okay. I want to read a comment from one of our Facebook viewers. He says, Oswald says, violence in general exists in the Bahamas because parents tell their children, in particular boys, to defend themselves. Don't let no one hit you or talk to you any kind of how. So we are growing up a generation of fighters. Then also we have parents that put these same professional men you talk about in such high esteem. A child is not prepared to tell on that person that is a no good, dirty molester, because no one will believe them. All right. Thank you so much, Oswald, for that comment. So let's get back on track now. Talking about toxic masculinity and what we need to do to address the problem at the root, because it's not enough to, I think a big part of our problem, particularly in the Bahamas, is that we are very reactionary. And so something happens and everybody reacts and, oh, there's this big uproar. And then we go back to business as usual until the next thing happens. And oftentimes when something happens and we do react, it's in essence us putting a Band-Aid on a hemorrhage. We want to deal with the situation at the surface, but not go deep, not really deal with the problem at the source, at the root of that problem. And you can't fix it that way. We will continuously be having these conversations if we're not willing to do the work, get our hands dirty, and go straight to the root of the problem. So what would you like to see, both of you, even though, Mr. McNeil, you are in Georgia, what are some of the things that you would like to see from a governmental perspective in terms of systems that need to be put in place so that we can address this problem from the root? Or is this a problem that can only be put at the feet of government, or is this something that everybody, all stakeholders, need to be a part of the solution? What are your thoughts?
You know, for me, and this actually, my partner and I'll mention again, Kendra Bo, we have put numerous proposals together. We have put numerous proposals together to government, right? Because we want to start at the primary school level. We want to also go into civic society. And we've met with, of course, I guess I can't call the name, but we've met with numerous persons with proposals because this is what we want to do.
Right.
So we're saying we want to start at the primary school. We want to get into the junior schools. We want to get into the senior schools in terms of educating. And that's why I said our program, it's called Engage, Communicate, and Transform, because we want to discuss from the primary level. Can you imagine what it's like if we're sitting down and talking with them with the 3 types of rape? In particular, I know we're not talking about this now, the marital, the rape, we talk about the stranger, the date rape, and we also want to talk about the sexual violence. We want to talk about building your self-esteem, because one of the things as young men, and in particular our boys, is when we have built our self-esteem, we can stand this peer pressure, so that when we in this space now and persons talks about this violence against the women and girls, we are able to take a stand. Even though we are left alone by ourselves, we are able to say, hey, no, I don't agree with this. And as a result of it, we have a level of influence. May not be the most popular one, may not be in the majority, but as a result of that influence. And so I'm saying we want to start this program she and I had put together was to go into the primary schools, and maybe not only just us, the junior schools, the senior schools, go into civic society, going even into the urban renewal areas. Can you imagine if we had a program like this in the evenings? You can report to our urban renewal center, right? Where you're able to have this discussion. You're able to sit down, and in particular our men and our boys, and have this discussion. So for me, these are some of the things that can be happening. And I recognize funding. And so in this case, you need the government and the private sector to come together. So I know a lot have been happening in the past, but as we move forward, if we can put such a program together, whether it's Kendra and I or somebody else, it starts the conversation. And we're targeting the younger crew from there. And as well as, in my case, like I say, also afterwards, those who are in prison, because they are incarcerated. I just shared with you, there are under 200 persons incarcerated now for sexual offenses. And out of that number, we need to reach them because they will return to society. And so I look at the restorative justice program, which talks about, someone may say, well, what is that? It talks about forgiveness. They sit in a healing circle. They talked about forgiveness for themselves, for the victim. We talk about acceptance for wrong. We talk about making amends. We talk about acknowledgement. And even in some cases, victim, though not related, is actually brought into that cycle. And a victim is able to share how did I feel when I was violently raped, or how did I feel when I was physically beaten? And in my experience, seeing a victim there expressing how they felt, I mean, and I have seen the response of persons who have perpetrated these various type crimes. And I'm just saying all of that is a part of the healing cycle. I know I talked a lot, but let me stop.
No. This is a talk show after all. Mr. McNeil, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that, but I think somebody has to come from the other side, the underside, as I have chosen to do, to communicate with the public. I'm not a big fan of waiting for the government. One of the reasons that I left government was because I was told that I had to choose between educating the public and locking people up, right? So they wanted me to continue to get on the treadmill of responding to symptoms. And after 20 years of doing that, I just didn't see the energy and all the effort that I put behind putting people in jail was doing as much good as it was going out and educating the public on the effects of abuse and trauma. And so now that's why I created my organization, the 12 Project, where I go to people and not wait for them to come to me. And I'm just amazed at how many people are interested in abuse and trauma, particularly young kids. And so my thing is, if we're going to do the governmental program, influence the people, because one thing I understand about government, they respond to the power of the people. And so if you encourage and empower people, you get the government's attention, almost like that Jesus model, heal people, the government will respond. And so one of the things that I try to do is create what God has put on these resources online, what we're doing now, and bring it into people's living rooms. Let's not hold the conversations in Congress buildings or We can have those conversations, but the only problem with it is Congress and the government only allow a certain amount of people to have platforms. And when you do have a platform, they limit what is said and goes out from those meetings. And so I think that we should do both. I think we should go and implore government agencies to start programs, pass legislation to make education about abuse and effects of abuse mandatory. If you can get a license to pastor a church, if you can get a license to do a daycare, if you can get a license to get married, you have to be trained on the effects of trauma and abuse. And so if you're going to be a parent, right, if you're going to receive some type of financial aid or something, you need to get trained on the effects of trauma and abuse. If we're really serious about healing from abuse and trauma, we have to show the world that we're serious by making people responsible and require them. If you commit an abusive offense, then you have to pay retribution to not just the victim, but to the community in which you committed that offense against. So part of your probationary fees won't just be you paying probation for the crime, but also instituting a program where you have to pay for the therapy of the victim to get healed, and you yourself get therapy as a process. And so I think it's going after the people and healing the people that are most affected by abuse that we can have the most effect. And I think once you start affecting the people, the government ears will perk up and say, hey, what can we do?
I want to read another comment from one of my Facebook viewers, and this will take us into the break because what this Facebook viewer talks about is what we're going to be talking about on the other side of the break. Doyle says, what people don't understand is violence is not only physical, violence is also mental. Women, in some cases, are more abusive than the men. A woman will say or do anything in her environment to belittle a man or even her son. Most divorces are influenced by women. You'll hardly hear a man ask for a divorce. He will go on in his quiet place to see how best, in some cases, the issue at hand can be resolved. Your comment was a bit too long, and so it got cut off. So as far as we can go, it says sometimes the physical violence happens when two people in the relationship can no longer, and I don't know what was after that. Well, I have some thoughts on that, but I am going to go to this break first, and then we're going to talk about our views on that comment as it relates to women perpetrating violence against men, because that is such a thing. It is a problem also, and we definitely have to look at that. So that is exactly what we will do on the other side of this break. You are listening to, and in some cases watching, GPS Global Paradigm Shift on Global 99.5 FM. Stay with us. We'll be back after this.
Your body's immune system is under constant pressure from things like stress, lack of exercise, and toxins in the environment. It's crucial to be proactive and support your immune system with the nutrients it needs to function effectively. But it's often hard to get these nutrients from food alone. Introducing fast-acting Zinc Plus Immune Support by Longevity. Unlike zinc-only supplements, Zinc Plus Immune Support builds on the proven power of zinc and adds complementary nutrients to give your immune system extra support. Vitamin D helps balance the effects of zinc, while our proprietary blend of natural fruit and root extracts provides the extra help your immune system needs to work against daily stressors. And we've included Longevity's exclusive plant-derived minerals to give your body the minerals it needs, but can't get from food alone. And because Zinc Plus Immune Support is delivered in a great-tasting, sugar-free, berry-flavored lozenge, it encourages quicker absorption of all these nutrients into your body. Zinc Plus Immune Support. Zinc plus the extra support your body needs to promote a healthy immune system. To learn more, contact your Longevity associate.
Welcome to Sunshine Auto, the hardest place on the planet for rims, paints, and tires.
We are your auto superstore for rims, Lexani, Azaras, Trueform, Western, Lux, Fuel, Tracklight, Tough, Rough Racing, Velocity, Mud, All-Terrain, and low-profile tires. Cars, homes, and commercial window tinting. At Sunshine Auto, we put God first and customer is king.
Blessed love.
It's gotten harder and harder to get your daily requirement of vital nutrients from food alone. Without additional vitamin and nutrient support, your health and well-being can suffer drastically. That's why Z-Radical was specifically formulated. It combines a blend of antioxidant-rich vitamins, minerals, and botanicals with the protective powers of fucoidan to help fill the gaps from lack of nutrients in your foods. The core of Z-radical is fucoidan, a naturally occurring polysaccharide that helps stimulate immune reaction, protecting you against inflammation and oxidative stress. We harvest this powerful mineral-rich nutrient from brown seaweed, harvested only from the world's most pristine ocean waters to ensure the purest quality. It's then extracted using cold process technology to ensure maximum levels of bioavailability. Then we add essential vitamins that help to protect your cardiovascular and nervous systems and are crucial for optimal immune and neurological function. Z-Radical also includes a proprietary blend of delicious antioxidant-rich fruits and berries. This great-tasting combination helps your body combat free radical imbalances that can contribute to a variety of degenerative conditions like arthritis and heart disease. Z-Radical. Experience the power of fucoidan with antioxidant-rich berries, 8 essential vitamins, and more to provide you with potent health benefits. To learn more, contact your Longevity associate.
Welcome back to GPS, Global Paradigm Shift on Global 99.5 FM. Michelle Malcolm in your company today, and my guests are Kevin McNeil and Elder David Williams. We are talking about gender-based violence from a male perspective. And prior to the break, I promised you that on this side, we would talk about the problem of gender-based violence, women perpetrating it against men. Yes, there is such a thing. Now, in the news, we hear it all the time about the other side where the woman is being abused by the man. But there are men who are suffering abuse at the hands of women as well. Let us go now to clip number 1 to take a look at what it looks like when men are suffering violence at the hands of women.
People tend to think of Mel as being tough, just being able to take care of things themselves and not needing help as much.
Trish Miles is a counselor at Resolve in Charleston. She has 10 years of experience working with domestic violence victims and survivors from all walks of life. At a time when women are considered the most likely victims of domestic violence, she says male victims are frequently overlooked or even ignored. How do we stop making this a taboo subject to talk about when it comes to men?
More education.
And by that she means empowering men to speak out and telling them it's okay to come forward with their stories. Nearly half of all women and men in the United States have experienced psychological aggression by an intimate partner in their lifetime. And it's no secret that more women are victims to physical abuse. With men, advocates and counselors say the abuse is primarily psychological. That doesn't mean men can't be physically abused. According to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1 in 10 men in this country will be physically attacked or stalked this year by an intimate partner, while 1 in 7 over the age of 18 will be the victim of severe physical violence by a partner. Still, for most men, the problem is mental abuse.
Name-calling, belittling, making their self-esteem very low, making them think that they're not worth anything.
Usually with men, it's more they use the kids against them. It's more of like the mental abuse and stuff, and sometimes it is physical.
Go tell mommy that if she doesn't do this, that this is going to happen, or go tell daddy that if he doesn't do this, that this is going to happen.
But the one thing both men and women share in common when it comes to domestic violence is the struggle of breaking the cycle of abuse. Something as simple as picking up the phone.
Seek help.
Okay, so I know that here in the Bahamas, every time we do a show like this, I get a lot of men telling me about the abuse that they suffer at the hands of women who try to hold their children against them. And you know, this is a real problem that they face. And we just heard, and that report, by the way, was US-based, where that is considered to be abuse as well, where you know that the man loves his children, you all two separate, and you decide to use the children as pawn to get back at the man. That happens quite a lot here in the Bahamas, I'm advised. And then there are cases where men are physically abused as well, apart from the mental and verbal abuse. But it's so taboo that they are not very willing to come forward because, as I think you would have touched on earlier, David, they see themselves as, you know, I'm going to be perceived as soft.
Yes.
If I come forward with this, I know that your camera just went out, so we need you to get back on as with your camera. But in the meantime, let's let Mr. McNeil chime in on this. What are your thoughts, Kevin?
Yeah, it's that men do not see it as manly. We don't have the space to come forward to say, and that's one of the reasons I held my secret so long. There's not real space for men to come out and be open about it. And when you don't have that space, again, what I said earlier, what we're talking about is trauma, and abuse is the symptom of it. And so this unresolved trauma that happens, we don't have a way to talk about it. And so when men are abused, we hold on to it. We hold on to it. And actually what happens is we start becoming abusive towards ourselves. We internalize it by lowering our self-esteem, by saying that we're not worthy of the love that we want to give or receive. And so, I mean, a perfect example is the Will Smith incident, right? So when we start talking about what is happening between he and his relationship, when he's brought on the red table to talk about an affair in the public's eyes that shamed him, that made him feel like he was less than a man for this to happen to him. And yet he's triggered by an event that happened in front of millions of people, where he allows that trauma, that unresolved trauma, that energy to come out in a destructive way against someone who looks like him and another male figure. And then nothing happens to him, right? He doesn't get arrested. And so it was a manly thing. Half people argue it was manly, and half people say, well, Chris Rock should have done this in response to that, and he was not manly. And so you start dealing with this conversation of this going back to this toxic masculinity. What does it mean to be a man, right? And so to allow a woman or someone, you're taught as a young boy, always, you're going to let that girl beat you? I mean, for a girl to beat you in anything, whether it was math, basketball, football, you were less than a man. So we're trained in that way. And so for it to happen, who you going to tell? When men get together, we don't talk about emotions. We talk about sports, right? We avoid anything emotional. And so we're not going to tell our woman, hey, you're making me feel weak, because then we're going to feel weak. And then that we are afraid that the woman might leave us because we are vulnerable and weak. So you're stuck in this hard place. Like, who do I tell? Who do I talk to? I can't talk to my male friends. I can't talk to females, right? I can't be open about it in the public, right? As a police officer, to be honest with you, if I went to a domestic violence call and a guy called the police, I would think something was wrong with him. Like, what do you mean she hit you? Like, you know, and there have been calls where officers have made fun of guys who call the police.
Yeah,
right?
same thing happens here.
Yeah, it's the truth. So I agree. You know, violence is used in different forms and different methods, where women are more psychological and withholding of affection and love from men, even coming from their children. But oftentimes it also gets physical. So what is a man to do? I mean, he complains, but what happens as a result of that complaining?
Well, you know, I came across a video of an experiment that was conducted. Dave, we're trying to get your camera back up, but it's I'm not seeing it on my end. So we're gonna I don't think it's connected. So I'm going to remove you from the stream until that comes up. But I found a video of an experiment that was conducted in Britain, I believe, where they had two actors playing the role of a man that was being physically aggressive to a woman, and then a woman being physically aggressive to a man. And it was very interesting to see the response of the crowd. And I will just go ahead and play this so that you can see this for yourself. And for those of you on radio, I will describe what happened after the fact.
What? Come here. Get your hand off me. Come here. Get your hand off me. Who was there? Get your hand off me. Who was there? Tell me who was there. People are looking at us. People are looking at us. Will you get your hand off me? Stop there. People are looking at us. What's wrong with you? We're fine. I'm glad, thanks. Okay, can someone call the police if you carry on doing that to someone? Okay. If I don't, someone else will. You haven't listened. You haven't gotten into what I'm saying to you. You're not even listening to me. That's what. Why do I push you like that? Because you won't on to me, but and you won't listen to me. I manly. I wasn't. No, you can't be. No, you can't be. Don't try and walk away. Stop. Listen to me when I'm talking. Don't try and walk away from me. Stop it.
Okay, so for the sake of our radio audience, when the man was attacking the woman, people obviously looked very concerned, and then some people, women, actually stepped in to say, "What are you doing? I'll call the police on you." I mean, they got involved, right? When the table was turned and the woman was attacking the man, people were staring, but not out of concern. They were actually laughing like it was a joke. And in this experiment, she got very violent with him. It wasn't just verbal, but she started hitting him and pushing him into the, and people were standing like, look, like it was some kind of move, like this was a big joke. And it's just amazing. You know, the way that people reacted when it was the woman who was being abused was totally different from the way they reacted in the same scenario, but with a man being abused. So it only speaks to what you just said, Kevin, in terms of the approach, why men would be reluctant to come forward, because you're laughed at, you're ridiculed, you're called soft, you're called sissy, but you got to be serious. You letting a woman, you know what I mean? So I feel for men who are going through this, because they really do not have very much recourse.
And that's what we talk about, toxic masculinity, not just coming from males. Toxic masculinity can come from females, not just from that action, but the reaction that they give men when it comes to men being abused or men being assaulted by females. And so you start talking about this toxic masculinity, you start talking about as a culture, we all believe that a man should be able to defend himself and should defend himself against any harm. But when it comes to a lesser gender doing it to him, he's to recoil back, and it's not considered abuse. Now that's him being a man, right? That's him taking on the abuse as a man should without responding in an abusive way. And so you start thinking about, wait a minute, but that's still abuse, right, toward him. And then when a man does come forward, then he's ridiculed, he's laughed at, he's talked about. He can't even share those moments with his male friends, because they would see him as less than a male, or they would give him some ill advice like, man, this is what you should do. And oftentimes that's going to require some retribution in a violent way. So it's one of those conversations when we start talking about male violence against males, is that if we're going to be honest, we have to be truthful. We don't live in a society that's friendly, that creates the space for men to be victims. And so that's the reality, and that's the truth, particularly when it comes from a victim, from a female, right? And so not to mention violence against another male or towards another male is kind of acceptable in our society, but it's not acceptable when it comes from female.
You know, to support what was just said, I can remember as a young boy at BEC, and I can remember there was this lady, she used to physically beat her husband. And, you know, and he would say, go stake him in the back of the yard and beat him. So he'd come to wake Philip. Wow. And we as men, we laughed, you know, when I think back about that, we laughed. And could you imagine what would happen if we had intervened, if there was some intervention as men? But we laughed. That was a big joke among us, right? But when we talk about women abusing men, someone once said women abuse men by putting great expectations on them, expectations for certain things. That's a form of abuse. And we looked at the abuse where women allow their children, their stepchildren, to abuse the man, the male, mentally and emotionally, and as nothing is done with it, right? And it's a form of abuse. I got a call from a gentleman some time ago, and the gentleman said to me, Dave, I was trying to reach you. He called me that next morning. So I said, what happened? He said, man, I couldn't sleep. I said, what you mean? He said, man, this woman would not allow me to sleep. I said, what you mean? He said, from the time I came home from work, I am tired. All I wanted to do was sleep, rest. The man said he didn't even want to make love. He just wanted to rest. But he said, in the room, she talk. He went in the kitchen, she talk. He went in the bathroom, she talk. He said, Dave, she would not just, and say, that's why I was trying to reach you last night, just so I could talk to you, maybe say a prayer, tell you talk to her or something. And so my point is that was a form of abuse. But normally when I share this story, you know, the first thing women is respond to me, you don't know what he did. That's what they say. Oh, Dave, you ain't know what he did. But that's besides the point. All he's saying is she just talking, and we know what the Bible talk about that. But a woman and going on the rooftop, right? We know about that. And all he was saying, Dave, I only wanted to sleep, just rest. Afterwards, we could talk or whatever, but anything. So all of these are forms of abuse that men go through. And I agree, as men, we ought to stand up. We ought to say something. I've been in numerous spaces where a person talked about the fact that police run them out of the station. And I'm talking about in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Another example, and this is not in the Bahamas, because persons may wonder who it is. I know of a pastor in another Caribbean country where I traveled to, has a wife, I believe she has some mental issues because she hits upon him. One time they had some disagreement, and where she threw water on the bed and threatened to light, stuff like this. And he refused to respond back. Today, they're going through a divorce because he chose to stand up as a male and not respond physically to her.
Right. We have a call on the line. Caller, welcome to GPS.
Yes. Good afternoon, Michelle.
Hi.
Yeah, and good afternoon to your guests.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Now, to the last speaker, this is the second time or third time on this one on this station, but I heard you mention on Guardian Radio that the man who does not take care of their children is not a man, they're a boy. I need you to be guided by your words.
But that's not what he said.
No, Michelle, I'm not asking you what he said. I'm telling him what he said. Listen to me.
What he said, hold on, caller. What he said was that is a problem when a man is told, because you're not taking care of your children, you're not a man, you're a boy. That's what he said.
Okay, all right. I stand to be corrected, and because that sounds better in my, maybe that sounds better to me, because I didn't hear it like that, and I'm glad that's what you said, because brother, I didn't like it. So let me repeat, and I said to Michelle, you mentioned that on another station, but I will take Michelle's view as relates to what you said on this particular station. Now, I will repeat myself. There are men in this country, okay, who have taken the national issues to heart and have desired, have followed up on their feelings and stood as tall as they could in this country. And I'm talking with brothers who was never given, and I'm only talking with brothers who was never given an opportunity to have a government job. So I don't want nobody who, the 400,000 people in this country, there's a large number of us that are men. Not all of us are going to get no government job. Not all of us are going to be loved by no hotel. And not all of us are going to be loved by business people in general. You're going to have to get up and make headway for yourself. So when people, for example, Amos Jr. Miller, yours truly, that's me. Anyone who ever know anything but talk show should know me by now. And I'm an entrepreneur, but before I became an entrepreneur, I am, and I will always be the light of the Most High. I'm the human personification of that light. Anything you talk about Jesus, that's what I am. Anything that he is entitled to, that's what I have. And you know what, Michelle? I need people to know this. Jesus told his disciples where to find money. That's the beauty. You remember his birth, his death, and all that. The nigga knew where to find money. And y'all ignored him, and then y'all killed him.
Okay, so what's the point?
Either which way, the conclusion is this. I know what you're saying. I'm 1,000% behind you, gentlemen. I'm only trying to explain to you. If I'm going to say there are some men in the Bahamas who have the ability to take care of themselves and their children, but they don't. That's a different conversation. See, people are trying, brothers are trying. They no mistake, everybody went broke in the Bahamas at the same time. I'm talking about uneducated, are broke at the same time. So be guided by what you say, brother. I'm sick and tired of coming to the radio station, but I'm only coming to correct some things in my spirit, because I have to listen to these things so I can know and be aware of what's going on and try to steer the government. And I want people to know, if we keep talking nonsense about the government, any one of the parties, and only two have letters. We're going to confuse them. The Bible tells you you're going to confuse them. And when you confuse the people who got power over you to give you food or give you work or give you life or give you death, and you confuse them, then you take what you get.
Okay, Amos.
Can I respond? Just so, Amos, I appreciate I appreciate your passion and I understand what you were saying, right?
I don't want, no, all I'm saying is, I don't want, listen to me. Michelle, let me close for this. Let me let Big Brother close. Let your brother close by this. I know he's with me and I with him. I with them, with y'all. Let me close with this. Let me tell you why I'm so passionate, why I sound so passionate today. My son, Joshua, on the 10th of April this month, he's going to be 22, Michelle. And for the last 12 years, gentlemen, I was trying to get my ex-wife, okay, to please take our child to the doctor to have his right leg placed in the hip socket where it was out of place for the last 22 years, come the 10th. So when they talk about what woman is doing, what some women is doing to some men, and some of us, we deserve what they're doing. I'm not saying we don't deserve it, but come on, not the child. When you're trying to take it to the children, you're taking it too far.
Okay.
Secondly, Michelle, my oldest daughter, I begged the woman, please do not give my child or my children any COVID-19 vaccine. They're young, their immune system is strong. Give them their bitters, give them this, give them that. The lady did not choose to give her new husband, two daughters who came into marriage, the vaccine. But you're gonna make a decision to give the vaccine to your oldest daughter, not even my son. So as far as I'm concerned, my son is being sacrificed, child sacrifice.
Okay.
And my daughter was child
Amos,
sacrifice.
Amos,
I gone, Michelle.
Amos,
I
yes,
gone.
yes.
You take it from there.
We get the point.
Okay. Oh, Amos, what I was saying is I understand your passion and like yourself, I too am passionate. What I was saying was in a training done in 2019, the Citizen Security and Justice Program, that's a program funded by the IDB. I received some training. And as a part of that training, when I looked at the information shared, they gave a list about 16 points about you are a man if you do this, and you are a boy if you do that. And I got up and with passion, and I said to the facilitators who were from Trinidad, I said, we're talking about men. We're talking about encouraging men. They said, we're talking about lifting up men. And I said, when you put information like this on a paper, this does not help the process. And when I shared this in the prison, and I said to them, where you see the word, you are a boy, I said, I would change that and put, you are a responsible man if you do this, and you are an irresponsible man if you do that. So that's what I meant, just so we'd be clear.
That's an interesting point, because I, quite frankly, was of the view that, just because you're a male don't make you a man. You just got some boys grown tall. So
well, yeah, I see that differently. Yeah,
well, I'm glad you come with this perspective, because honestly,
yes.
We could sugarcoat this as much as we want to. We got some lousy men, not just in the Bahamas, but all over the place, spreading children all over the place, spreading the seed all over the place, not taking any responsibility for these children. And a major part, I believe, of our social ills is the fact that we have so much fatherlessness, where we have so many homes that are being led by single parents, especially here in the Bahamas, single women, especially here in the Bahamas. I think last statistics were over 71%, and that could be higher by now. And so you do have a lot of men who are extremely irresponsible, who just in it for the fun, and then the child comes along, they don't want to take any responsibility for these children, and that ripple effect obviously impacts the entire community. So in my estimation, you're just a boy grown tall. So why is it now, from a male perspective, and this is why I wanted y'all to be here today, because obviously I'm coming from a female perspective. So talk to me about why it is that I should honor this man who clearly is not willing or maybe able or both to fulfill his responsibilities as a man. What makes him a man just because he's a male and he's fathered children? Please talk to me.
Oh, well, the first thing I could say, the same thing applies to female, because there are some, everything you said about a male, I could point in the direction of females likewise.
And
right?
I never disputed that.
Right. But I'd agree that the lack of father figure, I spoke to about 100 men on incarcerated at maximum security, out of that 100, I asked to show hands, and we counted. 80% of them responded that they grew up without a father. So there could be a correlation. I agree, right? But once again, like I say, the point is, when we meet people in a space or in a place where they're down, what we ought to do is lift them up. The problem is society decides that they want to pull you down. They want to share all the negative things, and that does not help. I am already flat on my back. Telling me what I've done wrong is not going to help me. What you need to do is show me now how I can get up, right? Christ is my example. This is why Uplifting Men's Ministry, and this is what I seek to share. I seek to share spiritual principles because I truly believe no transformation can take place unless it's from a spiritual perspective. Programs only take you so far.
Okay.
After spiritual, I share with you from an educational perspective. I share with you from a financial perspective, because economic empowerment, whether through working or whether through the entrepreneurship, makes a difference. So these are the programs, right, that I share with individuals which could help to transform lives.
We have a caller on the line. Caller, welcome to GPS.
Hi, good afternoon to you and your guests.
Good afternoon.
But the thing is, it's not always only the men. It's the women too.
Amen.
The women have control over their body. So if they don't protect themselves in going with these men and having sex with these men, you're going to get pregnant. And so that's why a lot of children come in this world. But the women have the control over their body. So they have to decide, well, hey, I'm not going to have no unprotected sex with this man.
That's right.
So they are also the problem. It's not just always the men. The same way with that 40-year-old and that 14-year-old girl. Yes, it's not all the blame on him. She knew. She's been contacting him.
See, we got a problem with that. We got a problem, because I hear what you're saying about her contacting him, but at the end of the day, she is a child.
Yes, I agree to you.
I don't care how much a child contacting you and coming as a man, you're supposed to say, little girl, go sit your hip down. I am in no way putting the blame at her feet, because he is a man. He is the adult in this conversation.
No, I'm not saying it's not just him, it's both of them. Both of them, because she's a student supposed to be in school 9 o'clock that morning.
At the end of the day, she is a 14-year-old girl.
She understand, because she was relating to him on those what's up or whatever.
At what point does he not stop and say, as an adult man, this is not something I should be engaging in? At what point?
No, I agree with you, but the thing about it, this ain't one time she did it. Many times she
We have to stop blaming victims in this country. We have to stop it.
No, but it ain't always the men, though. I must say, too.
In that case, listen, that's another show. We ain't going there.
Yes.
But thank you for calling.
Y'all have a good day.
Thank you for calling.
All right.
We got to stop.
I think it has to do with personal responsibility. If I was the father of that child, that young lady, right? What she did was wrong. What he did was wrong, and he's already paying the consequences. But as the father, I want to sit down with my 14-year-old daughter to find out from her now what would lead her to make such a decision.
Do we even know if that child's father is in the picture?
Well, right, father. Well, I'm saying for me, as a father, as a male, whoever, as the male figure, I want to have a conversation with her. What led to that? Because there are risks and there are consequences. Now the father's in jail, and I'll probably see him at some point before the year out, but the child now has a baby, which will affect and change her life for the rest of her life. I want to know with my daughter what led to that such decision with a gentleman that age.
So, Kevin, in case you wonder what we're talking about, there's a case here in the Bahamas where a 40-year-old man pled guilty and got a plea deal for impregnating a 14-year-old schoolgirl. And there's this huge debate over that, for the fact that she approached him. Mind you, this man knew she's a school child in school uniform.
Yes.
So, there's no excuse for that.
40-year-old there's no way you can blame a juvenile, a female, for any actions that a grown adult male takes. I don't care if she volunteered for it, if she initiated. As a man, as an adult, you're still assaulting a child. And it leads into a deeper conversation, going back to what David said. As a father, we have to be careful to bring in forth accusatory language or victim blaming on the victim by the way we question them, because sometimes we need to sit back and listen. What was it about that that, and this is me asking myself that and not the victim, that my child had to go outside of the home to seek male affirmation. And so
That's right.
now
That's why I
now
asked the
instead of,
question.
yeah,
Yeah. Do we even know if the father was in the picture? We don't even know
yeah,
that.
but instead of using lens, sometimes we have to use a mirror. And going back to what we talked about, when we start talking about men, I think we're using the wrong word here, and I think that word is loaded. I think we start telling our boys to how to be fathers, how to be husbands. Then you bring forth a connotation of responsibility versus man is this right to own something or to power something. And
That's
so when
powerful.
you start talking about fatherhood, then the child gets to understand that a father fathers children. A man has babies, right? And so you want to be a father, right? And so a part of being a father is that responsibility. You know, that's the first thing God gives humankind is responsibility. And that's what makes us able to live healthy and justice in our world, is that we take on the responsibility not just for ourselves but also for the other. That is my responsibility, particularly when it comes to children, to protect at all costs, even to protect the child against themselves. Now, the
Exactly.
proper thing that would have been done if that child would have reached out to that 40-year-old, and I'm just speaking from the sidelines, I don't know all the details, was that man to go to her father and say, "Sir, we have a situation where I have been reached out by your daughter. Something needs to happen. We need to have a conversation. You need to have a conversation," like David said with your daughter, to find out what's going on with her, right? To get her some healing, some therapy, some kind, not blame her, but to help her. And I think that's very important.
That is the spirit of a father, which clearly the man who impregnated that child does not have.
No.
Because if he had the spirit of a father, he would want to protect that girl as opposed
Yeah.
to have sex with her.
Yeah.
And this is why I have a major problem with anybody who blames that 14-year-old girl for his behavior.
And I want to bring out a point too, because that just doesn't happen in Bahamas. It happens in America. That it's largely, oftentimes, it's the female blaming the female victim, right?
Yes.
And that is why victims don't come forth, because they're not believed. We give suspects the benefit of the doubt and we blame victims. And we ask the victim, "Can you prove it?" Where we ask the suspect, right, just to sit back and to disprove it by just saying no or being silent on the issue. So that goes back to what Nelson Mandela said: education is the most powerful tool you can use in which to change the world. If we're not educating people and young people, this is not right. Yeah, I understand, when you get to a certain age, you think you can do certain things, but it's not right. Right.
Yeah.
And so
What,
I just think it's important that, and that's what I run up against here, is that a lot of female adults, male and female, think that the child has participation in the abuse itself. So it's like, how do you say that? And let's talk about being a man, and not just being a man, being a father, being a husband, being a
That's
leader, right?
very powerful point. Very powerful point.
What-
Elder, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. One of the things I look at in most situations, right? I try to remove the emotional side of it, and part of the reason I believe it is because, like I say, over the years I've encountered numerous persons incarcerated, including at some point I perhaps would encounter this gentleman. Not that I'm going to go look for him, but at some point, I would encounter him, and I have to remove the emotional side of it and be able to minister, to share, to teach to him on the basis that, as a human being, Christ is an example. But my point is, I'm a firm believer in personal responsibility, right? I also talk about, even when we do the rape classes, we talk about risk, right? So a person sometimes would say, well, you're blaming. You're not blaming. You're talking about, for certain risks, there are consequences. So let me give you an example. So now for me, if this young lady is having sex, I talk about David Williams now as the father, am I going to be satisfied if my daughter had sex and got pregnant for a 17 or 18 or a 19-year-old child? No, I'm not going. My point is, I'm not going to be satisfied with getting pregnant for no one unless that's her husband, because that's the way I want to teach her. That's the way she ought to go. Mm-hmm. So that's my point. So whether it was 40, is 60, it's wrong. But if it was 16 or 17, I still, as a father, would not sit there and be satisfied. Oh, well, at least that's a 17-year-old or 18-year-old. I still would feel I would have failed as a father.
I understand you.
But what if it was the other hand and it was a son who got a girl pregnant? Would we feel the same way, or was he just being a boy or being a man?
For
Exercising
me
his right of-
personally, sorry, Kevin, for me personally, I have a 15-year-old son. And for me personally, I would still feel the same way, because that 15-year-old son who I go home to today, I want to teach him. I made the mistake of having a child outside of marriage, and I want to teach him to do the right thing. Because if it can fall on me anyhow, if he get a girl pregnant, it's still an expense on me. So I want to teach him the right way.
Yeah, but that's not the common thing. It's particularly here in America. Men are celebrated for that type of act. And they're called, even in our music and our culture, they're called pimps. And we talk about, Will Smith smacked a man and got a trophy for it. We go back to the Oscars some years ago, giving best musical score from a movie called Hustle and Flow, where the name of the song was called It's Hard Out Here for a Pimp. And they gave them an Oscar, and the people in the audience stood up and clapped about it. And so when we start talking about violence in our culture, we celebrate it. And so we teach women that their bodies are their only value. And so when girls go out to try to get some attention and love from so-called men, it is not for a sexual point of view. It's for this intimacy, this starving of intimacy that men don't know how to give. Only thing they know how to give is the physical part of themselves and not the intimate part of themselves. And so it takes a mature spirit, and we're going to talk about spirit, to actually engage in a true intimate relationship, knowing that a young person has not yet matured to that level of intimacy responsibility to engage in anything close to any physical contact, let alone a intimate conversation about things. And so I think that's where we at. We on this treadmill. Like I said, and we're gonna keep coming back to these conversations until we say, hey, wait a minute, let's go deeper than just the symptoms of what we're seeing. And let's start listening to the pain and the wails and the repercussions. Why are our children looking towards sex as a tool of comfort and value? Have we not let them down? Have we not generated, which means to recreate something that we didn't deal with? And so now it's being passed on to our children because we were irresponsible. Because now if we're going to talk responsibility, where did they get this from? Have we failed our children? And how do we fix what we didn't confront so that we can transform what we don't like?
Let's let them marinate on that. We have one more break, right? Yeah, we like 9 minutes past our break time. So let's take this final break of the show. And then when we come back, we're going to bring this all home as it relates to gender-based violence from a male perspective. You're watching and listening to GPS. Stay with us.
Understanding your microbiome, also known as your gut ecosystem, can change everything you thought you knew about nutrition, digestion, immunity, and metabolism. Keeping your gut ecosystem healthy and balanced is essential. Ultimate Microbiome by Longevity was specifically formulated to optimize this ecosystem. It provides the advanced support your gut needs through prebiotic, probiotic, and postbiotic supplementation. Our unique blend of probiotics includes Lactobacillus and Plantarum, healthy bacteria that can help prevent harmful bacteria from taking over your gut. Increasing your gut's population of beneficial bacteria creates a more balanced gut microbiome, which has been shown to aid in weight loss, skin health, sleep, mood, and may even help with seasonal allergies. Ultimate Microbiome also promotes the production of postbiotics. Postbiotics are key to help regulate your gastrointestinal health. To enhance digestion, Digizyme Multi-Enzyme Complex, a blend of 5 specific enzymes, has been added to Ultimate Microbiome. It can help break down food so your body can better absorb nutrients. Plus, we've added our proprietary I-26 Hyperimmune Egg Powder to aid in the elimination of disease-causing gut bacteria and help your body balance its immune response. Ultimate Microbiome, the scientific, proprietary, and holistic approach to gut health that helps optimize your body's entire gut ecosystem. To learn more, contact your Longevity associate.
Welcome to Sunshine Auto, the hardest place on the planet for
We are your auto superstore for rims, Lexani, Azaras, Trueform, Western, Lux, Fuel, Tracklight, Tough, Rough Racing, Velocity, Mud, All-Terrain, and low-profile tires. Cars, homes, and commercial window tinting. At Sunshine Auto, we put God first and customer is king.
To stay healthy, it's crucial to make sure you get the nutrition you need every day. But it's difficult to get all your recommended vitamins and minerals from food alone. Even in the United States, 94% of people are deficient in at least one nutrient. Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 by Longevity is a simple, convenient, and affordable way to help your body get the essential nutrients it needs. It's an advanced plant-driven multivitamin mineral complex that contains certified organic whole foods, trace minerals, and antioxidants. BTT 2.0 supports your body's natural defense system with a proprietary blend of energy-boosting and body-loving nutrients, plus prebiotics, probiotics, amino acids, and enzymes that support digestion. With an unusually high ORAC score of 8,000, you get even more antioxidants to help combat free radicals that can cause damage to your cells. But to get the most benefit and value from any multivitamin, your body must be able to break down the nutrients so you can fully absorb them. Otherwise, they'll just pass through your system without doing any good. Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 was specially formulated with synergizing cofactors to ensure you get maximum nutrient absorption. Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 is the easiest way to give your body the balance and complete daily vitamin mineral supplement it needs for optimal support of your overall health. To learn more, contact your Longevity associate.
This portion of GPS is brought to you by Tiki Bikini Hut at Junkanoo Beach. Great food, cool tropical drinks, and family fun in the sun.
Welcome back to GPS, Global Paradigm Shift on Global 99.5 FM. Michelle Malcolm here in your company along with Kevin McNeil and Elder David Williams. Okay, now I'm seeing you again. I don't know what was going on with that other one, so let me kick that out and we can bring you back in. Okay, we got you now. There you go. Okay, so today we are talking about gender-based violence from a male perspective. It's been a very interesting conversation thus far. I want to go to a couple of our comments from our Facebook viewers. Boy, y'all been typing away. Okay, let's see what we got here. Let's see. Siobhan says, one of the most common problems we have in this country is the ability to have open, non-judgmental conversations. And most times, many individuals lack maturity level. Before dating, I would humbly suggest folks work on themselves. Each individual must be accountable for themselves and acknowledge their strengths and weaknesses and do what? I think that was the end of that comment. One common issue between men and women in this country is accountability. Many men blame the women and many women blame the men. Two imperfect beings trying to justify their weaknesses and bad habits. Until we own up to our own individual struggles and get the healing that we need, unfortunately, our trauma and triggers will only continue. Instead of blaming each other, how about having mature and honest conversations? Well, that's certainly what we're trying to do here today. Siobhan says, I welcome a man who is unafraid of his feelings. Cry if you have to. Speak of things that you struggle with. I can speak for others, as no two women or men are alike. I realize as a mature woman that the truth, although difficult, sets one free. Speak up. Someone will listen without judging. All right. Let's see. We have another comment coming in from, let's see. Doyle Bethel says, a lot of men, when you talk to them, they will tell you it's hard for a man to get help in any capacity. The legal institution has failed the male man to the point he is frustrated because he can't have that relationship with his children. Some men, I heard, can't even get visitation rights because what the mother has told the court. Now, we have a bigger problem. No men in the home. They caught up with friends in gangs and other criminal activities. Folks turn around and ask, where is, I guess you meant to say, the father in the home? And then Wall says that's what a lot of men and gangs prey on young people who have not learned their value and don't truly understand the effects the consequences will have on them physically and mentally. We do have a lot of social ills that stem back to the disintegration of the family structure. And when you consider that the family is the foundation of the house, it's the first society in which you learn to relate to others, it's your first community. Um, but it's the foundation of the house. And I think a part of our problem, and I suspect that this is true for the United States as well, is that we have put so much emphasis on the window treatments and the walls and the beautiful ceiling, the lighting fixtures, the tiles on the roof, and the driveway, and all these beautiful aesthetic things, ignoring the foundation. And I don't care how beautiful that house is. If that foundation is shaky, it's all going to come crashing down. So, is that what we are suffering from, where we have ignored the foundation of society, which is the family structure, to um, to our own what's the word I'm looking for? It's hurting our society as a whole. So is this a part of our problem, that we have continuously ignored the foundation of society?
Kevin, this time I can let you go first.
Okay. Well, I think that's a great question, but I think the ministry that David is doing is going into the lions and going into where men are located, not waiting for men to come to him. And like that Facebook respondent said, that when men do speak, they feel like they're not heard. And so I think they're looking for certain areas where they know they won't be heard, so there aren't any alternatives to be heard, and just to be heard and not to be critiqued on what they're saying, but just to be heard about what they have to say. And I think for David to go in a prison system and just listen to men, whether you deem it a complaint, whether you deem it just an excuse, let them get it out first before we judge what they're saying. And I think that's the beginning of hearing the truth. Now, it may not be what we agree with, but it's what they believe. And if that's what they believe, we can't transform them unless we understand where this belief stems from. Where is it coming from? And again, it goes back to going from teaching boys to be men to teach them how to be fathers and leaders. Instead of having men's ministries, let's create fathers and leader ministries. That way we create accountability and responsibility within the education process. So we're not just lauding man for having babies or what we call being a male figure. So I think the language needs to change, and we need to start by educating ourselves about the importance of language and the importance of how we got here. Let's talk about the journey to here before we try to continue on a new journey, because if we don't understand how we get here, we'll continue to go in the wrong direction. And I don't care how fast you go in the wrong direction, it's still the wrong direction.
I hear you.
You know what I would say is this. Let's talk. We're talking about foundation. The foundation is Jesus Christ. And so we want to talk about building families. Why not go back to the one who created families in the beginning? He has set the foundation. He has set the principles. He has set the values. And so if we can encourage, and this is why I said the first thing is pointing men, and this is what I do in prison. I point them back to the spiritual, not a church or denomination, right? Because the denomination or the church don't save you. I point them back to the spiritual foundation, that is having their relationship with Christ. And once we look for Christ as the head, we use the Bible as our guide, and that's the one who created the family, and who better to tell us how to lead our families than Jesus Christ.
I agree with you, David, but I think also what happens is men sometimes can't get past their humanity before they get to the spiritual piece. I think a lot of times, I come from the spiritual aspect as well, but I think a lot of men struggle with their humanity, and their struggle with the struggles that they deal with on a level that they can see and live every day. And I think sometimes, oftentimes, I have to get past that phase before I can get to that spiritual phase, because sometimes the men will shut me down when I go there. And because a lot of men will say, well, that's why I don't go to church, or that's why I don't do this, because they were hurt by men. right? They were hurt by a male figure, so they learned not to trust a male. And I think that's a great point to come from. But I think that's why listening is so hard, to hear where you're coming from and to hear your pain. Because to be angry with you, some men are angry with God. And particularly when you use that metaphor, God is father, what happens when you use that? And I never had a father, or my father molested me or was abusive towards me. So that anger has to be transmitted and be honest. Can we be honest first? And I think that's the impetuous of healing is if that's my main purpose, is to heal. And to do that, I have to be honest and be allowed to be honest without judgment.
That is so powerful. That is so powerful, because you're right. We always say, Father God, our Father who art in heaven. And if you have had a bad relationship with your father, or there was no father at all, that could be a barrier. That could definitely be a barrier if you approach with that, because my only concept of father is not positive. That is really, really powerful.
Yeah.
Is this something that can be turned around? Can we fix this problem? Because, you know, if you look at it from just surface, it looks like this is a this is a huge elephant. How are we gonna tackle this?
You know, for me, I go right back to the text again.
Yeah.
With man is impossible, but with God all things are possible.
Always.
Let me share last text. Galatians 2:20 says, I am crucified with Christ, yet not I, nevertheless, not I, but the life I live by faith in the Son of Christ who died and gave his life. My point in that is that trust that when you open up your mouth from a spiritual perspective, it is the Christ that lives in you who knows each person, he or she, right? And the Christ that is in you through his spirit will direct you how to reach that individual, whether you begin with a spiritual or whether you begin otherwise. But it is him who I'm trusting, that once I open up my mouth, he's speaking through me to reach that individual in whichever way he chooses. Because I really, as a human, don't know how to. It is him who's doing it through me.
Gotcha. What are your thoughts, McNeil? How do we turn this around?
Well, I think connection. We have to do what we're doing now. Open the floor for conversations, to have those conversations. And not, I think sometimes, particularly I find in my travels and my engaging with communities, the emphasis is placed on being right and not being effective. And I don't want to be right. I want to be impactful and effective. If that means I'm wrong, then so be it. I want to be impactful, because I think change is more important than just meeting to talk about subject matters that matter most. I think we have to add action, and we have to come down, sit at the table, and have these conversations more than just, when it's convenient. We have to have them often. It amuses me, and really not amusing. I use that word to hint on the seriousness of how we play ourselves into to structures and tradition. Like April is Child Abuse Awareness Month, or Child Abuse Prevention Month. Well, every day should be Child Abuse Prevention and Awareness Month, right? And so we get caught up, and okay, it's okay to talk about it now, or we want to talk about when people are ready to hear about it. Well, I don't want to have conversations because it makes you comfortable. I want to have conversations because it causes change. And I think what David said, you have to trust that the work that you're doing is from up on high, and you're being called to do it. And it has nothing to do with you. It's bigger than you. And so that's the concept I go by. Like, look, what we're doing here is bigger than us, and it takes more than us. Yeah, we can spark the conversation, but it's going to take us doing more than just conversing. We're going to have to come together, sit down, and struggle, because I believe that's what calling means. It means God saying, come son, come daughter, invite you into the struggle with me, partner with me to bring change into the world.
That's good. So Siobhan is a fan. Siobhan says, we must bring Mr. Kevin McNeil to the Bahamas for an all-male seminar. He has a wealth of knowledge and experience as a former sexual abuse survivor, law enforcement officer, author, and CEO of the 12 Project.
Thank
and
you,
she
Siobhan.
also says, I agree with Kevin, not everyone is spiritual, so we may be losing some men and women in that conversation due to us not being neutral in our approach. Oh boy, I tell you. So Wall is taking issue with the approach from a spiritual standpoint, he says, when you can't find a solution, you fall back on religious dogma. Christ thought about God. Religion teaches about a Christ. Okay. All right. Here's the thing. If we truly believe, and not everybody does, but if we truly believe that we are triune beings, that we are spirit beings living in a physical body that possess a soul, then to me, in order to find a solution to any problem, we have to go back to the source. We have to go back to the source. Because it's like if you want to know the purpose of a thing, you don't go to the thing, you go to the manufacturer of the thing, like Dr. Miles Monroe always used to say.
Amen.
Right? So every product comes with a manual. And if you want to know how that product operates, you don't ask the product, how does it operate? You go to the manual, because the manual is the mind of the maker of the thing.
Amen.
So if we want to get to the root problem and fix it from the root, we need to go back to the original intent of the source. Because only then can we find the true solution. There is a manufacturer. There is a source.
Yes.
And if we continue to ignore the source,
Yes.
if we continue to pretend that as the thing, we know more than the maker of the thing,
yes,
then we're going to continue to have these problems. And I'm not talking religion. I'm talking relationship, where you tap into the source of your very being to find the answers that we all need. That's just my little 5 cents. I'm going to give you each 30 seconds to give us your final thoughts. Elder David, let's start with you.
The only thing I'll say is I'll call the source, and the source is Jesus Christ. He's the owner. He's the creator. We ought to go back to him. He knows everything. And the last thing is I want to encourage persons out there, like I always say, uplift our men. Does not make sense. On Father's Day, we want to pull the men down and expect them to do better. Uplift our men.
Thank you so much. And Mr. McNeil?
Yes, I would still say love is the most powerful energy in the world. We have to learn to love our men. We have to learn to protect them in spaces where they're willing to be vulnerable. And we have to learn to listen to their anger, because if we don't listen to their anger, we're going to feel it in other ways. And I believe that God is calling us to a place and to a point right now that we can bring change into the world. And that's just why these conversations are important. And I believe that as long as we're still having these conversations, still doing the work, I believe that change is on the horizon.
Gentlemen, thank you both so much for being a part of GPS today. I really enjoyed this conversation and learned a lot. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
That's my time. Thank you. That's my time, guys. Got to get out of here. We have more great programming coming up for you here on Global 99.5 FM. Tomorrow, Wellness Wednesday, we're talking about preventative medicine, preventative care, how to stop yourself from getting sick to begin with. Don't you miss it. I'm Michelle Malcolm. Thank you so much for being a part of the show today. Have a good afternoon.